Hello again, Steve here with a few thoughts on a question. When is the time to meet with those interests? I don't know, if you're like me, you've probably got interests in life which you tend to say, you know what, one day I'm going to do something about that interest. I'm going to get into it, travel there, have a look at it, do some research into it. Once I'm done this, I'm going to do what I really want. And one of my interests for a while has been having a little bit of a look into the origins of some of the philosophy that I enjoy. And the philosophy I enjoy tends to be along the lines of, as much as possible, reason, but also the acknowledgement of things of the heart, the love of music and the arts and this, what you might call the spiritual side of life. And in following this route through certain people and where my interests lie, I find the names of certain philosophers that come up from time to time, and one of them is Friedrich Nietzsche. And although to many the guy was quite controversial, I never really knew because I never looked much into it at all, other than quotes other people were coming from. So I was in a used bookstore the other day, and right in front of me was, for like a couple of dollars, was this book called The Philosophy of Nietzsche. And so rather than, I just thought, you know what, I'm going to get that book. It's like a couple bucks, $2.95. I'm going to pick it up and just work my way through it. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it because I think it comes down to that saying, or that question. When is the best time to meet those interests? This has been an interest of mine, what it is that Nietzsche was talking about. Rather than just getting an interpretation of what somebody said, I will read some of his, something somebody has translated out of his words and get a sense for myself. Be the judge, and work through, in my ability to reason it through and follow the logic. That's going to be things that I'm probably going to say, this Nietzsche guy is nuts. On the other hand, it's like, wow, I can connect the dots to where he's going. And it'll give me some background context, perhaps, into these quotes and suggestions, or rather, quotes and comments that I've heard over the years about Nietzsche. And I can form my own conclusions a little bit better. So, in answer to the question, in my thought anyway, in my thinking, is when is the time to meet the interests? I'd say it's now. I mean, maybe not in its completeness, but at least to begin taking the steps, if they're that important. If we keep on saying, to ourselves over and over again, one day I will, one day I will, one day I will. Well, what is it we can do now? And one of my interests was to look into some of the source material in some of these philosophies that I enjoy. And, Nietzsche, of course, he was a student of, I believe, people like Emerson and Socrates and so on, who I also somewhat admire. I've read a bit of Emerson, haven't read much of Socrates, except for quotes other people have. But I think it'll be a stepping stone, anyways, to read a little bit of Nietzsche. And if you have such interests too, or whatever it is, if you love motorcycles or have an inclination to go on a hike on a certain trail, and sometimes I think rather than just dreaming about it, it's valuable. I'm going through another book at this moment as well. Darn, I forget the name, but it's called the Steps of Execution or something. I should leave a comment about it later. And they make a really good point in there, which is that a lot of times we focus on what we want, and we call that the goal. But it's not really the goal. The goal is kind of, in a way, what are the action steps we have to take so that automatically what we want will arrive. And they use the example of, if you want to move a big rock, right? That seems like the goal, to move the big rock. But we don't have the strength to move the big rock. So we got to set up some sort of a pry bar, a lever arm, right? So the goals then become setting up the mechanism to put the pry bar in there, and then giving all of our effort onto the pry bar. That's the goal. It's the steps that are going to scientifically lead to the results. And one of the things that I think is important is to just begin certain steps. Certain steps that we can reason through are going to actually lead to us getting there. I was talking to a guy tonight who wants to get in shape, and I was telling him about how I used to reason this through with people, and myself as well, way back in the day when I was a fitness instructor, about people who would say they have no time to get in shape, but even though they say they want to get in shape. And one of the things I would suggest is starting off asking them, look, do you have 3 minutes in the morning? And almost universally people say, of course I have 3 minutes. What's that got to do with it? I said, okay, here's a suggestion, not anything definitive, just a suggestion. Put your sneakers on in the morning. And then they'd ask me, well, then what? And then take them off. And they'd ask me, well, how is that going to help me get in shape? Well, I said, well, physically it's not going to do anything for you, but it's going to do something with your mind in terms of a habit development. If you can continually put your sneakers on every morning, once you've got that down without fail, then what you can do, put your sneakers on and step outside the house and stand on the porch. And then what, they would ask. Well, then step back in, take your sneakers off and go to work. Well, what's that going to do for my fitness? Physically, nothing, I would say. But it does something to your mentality, your attitude, your habits, right? And that's what we got to work on first. Because generally we all know what it takes to the steps often, if we think about it, to get to what we want. But our biggest obstacle is ourselves. So if we can get into the habit of doing the little things, like putting that pry bar in, then we're on the way to eventual results. Because as long as we're doing steps that are part of the equation to move the bigger goal, then it's only inevitable to connect the dots. So they'd ask, well, then what? Very often in terms of the exercise. I just make a suggestion, well, then put your sneakers on, stand on the porch, and take an extra minute, walk to the end of the driveway and back. And then what, they'd ask? And they'd say, take your sneakers off and go to work. Well, how's that going to get me in shape? It's not going to get you in physical shape, but it's getting your mind into the habit of putting your sneakers on, standing outside, rain or shine or snow, walking to the end of the driveway and back. When you can do that consistently, you then put your sneakers on, stand on the porch, walk to the end of the driveway, and then to the end of the block, back, take your sneakers off and go to work. And when you can do that consistently, one day you're going to go, aha, I can do this. I'm not going to just walk to the end of the block. I'm going to walk 2 blocks down, around the block, and back home. Bingo! Once you can do that, now you're starting to expand it. Now you're getting into calorie consumption. You're getting into an exercise program, the rudiments of it. And that's when change is going to happen. The same thing can be done for any change, is if we can take baby steps consistently and expand upon those baby steps. We begin with the steps to moving on. And it is a form of this type of strategy that is talked about in this book, these four steps to execution or something like that, executing a goal, right, that these guys talk about. And I think it's important. So, in terms of when is the best time to meet those interests, well, it can be now, because it can be as small as 3 minutes to begin the process, right? To begin the first aspects. See, if we draw things out in terms of our goals, in terms of an equation, right? All of this equals this, which is what we want. Then all of this can start with something small. And we consistently do that small thing, then we can build upon it, build upon it, and build upon it. At a certain point, we have the whole equation, which is going to equal out. And things like losing weight or quitting smoking and these sort of things, That's the end result. I mean, there's more to it. There's also focusing on why we want to lose that. What does that look like, But nevertheless, those results are automatic once the equation is put in place. It's like happiness, right? We can never really pursue happiness in and of itself. But when we add up the equation of leading a certain life, which leads to happiness, now that is like the rock finally moving. Yay. So anyways, just some thoughts on improving the quality of our life experience from one man's perspective. And hopefully that's helpful. Steve here again. Great chatting. Talk again soon.